Good afternoon, and hoping that the technology is all working and I'm not doing that horrible thing of talking to myself again. Welcome to the Isle of Wight, where it is a bit cloudy, but weather is going to get back to normal in the next few days, and typically for the weekend, which I haven't taken off, it's going to be nice and sunny on Friday. Also joined by Anthony Morrow from Manchester, which I haven't been watching the cricket this morning and seeing that it's raining in Manchester already, honest. But we'll hear plenty from Manchester as we go along. Not a lot of housekeeping from me today. The boss is away, so I'm dealing with everything, and I've got everything in hand, so I don't need to kind of go through a list of things to talk about. Suffice to say, we've got loads of you in the chat room, so yeah, be loud, be noisy, put in loads and loads of questions. Anthony's very opinionated in the best of times, so feel free to chuck a lot of stuff his way. I've gone for a t-shirt of the week this week, Axe Capital. Sadly not a client of the Landcat. If you know who Axe Capital are, then if you know, you know. But yeah, I thought I'd make a little bit of an effort this particular day. Right, straight on to business. Enough small talk from me. Anthony, hello. How are you? Yeah, pretty good, thanks. Yeah, I'm trying to think of all of my visits to Manchester and packing extra clothes, and certainly wouldn't wear a t-shirt to Manchester, but and the chat room is saying that they can only see me, which is obviously exactly what people want to do rather than you, but we'll see. Yeah, getting a little bit of feedback around all of that one, so we'll plow on. But can people actually hear Anthony as well in the chat? Yep. Okay. We'll carry on with that and see what goes on. Obviously, Manchester, in terms of its technology and broadband, isn't as advanced as the Isle of Wight, being the technology metropolis that we are. So that probably explains what's going on there. So, Anthony, tell me about OpenMoney. I think hopefully quite a few people have heard of you and heard of OpenMoney, but tell me exactly what happens within that business. Yeah, seeing mixed response in the chat room around the audio around all of this, and I think Steve obviously is an expert in terms of issues with Crowdcast and these types of things, and he's put in a few tips around all of that. So we'll plough on for now, just because there are some people who can hear us with what we're talking about. So there you were, kind of at the start of the year, Anthony, as you say, kind of into the third year, third anniversary of OpenMoney, and starting to get a real handle on what it is your customers need, and how you can serve them, and the different channels which you've got with all of that. And obviously along came COVID. What's that been like for? Let's start with the staff at OpenMoney, the people who work with you. Okay. Anthony, I'm just going to jump in there. We're still getting a few issues around all of this. So I think what I'm going to do is take a nuclear option around all of this and boot you out of the session, if I can, and invite you back in a second. See if the old reboot trick does a second. So going to leave you in a second, Anthony, and watch out for the invite coming back on the screen to reconnect. Sorry about this, everyone. Wait for Anthony to come back in. The joke of the day whilst we're doing this, but sadly don't have anything prepared. And most of the Isle of Wight jokes I know are deeply offensive and quite possibly get me fired. So I'm not going to do any of that, I'm afraid. looking through the attendee list, and it comes down to again. Good news is Paulson isn't on here, so if we can all pretend this had never happened, I'll edit the video when we put it on YouTube, and just keep it as our little secret. Right, Anthony should be coming back on in a second, so fingers crossed. Manchester has got its web sorted out. Anthony, there you are.
Hello, I'm back.
Chat room, tell me, is that better? Can you hear and see Anthony?
Oh, excellent. Well, I apologise for those people. Who just wanted to hear me and didn't want to see me. But
excellent. Right. So you were just telling me about how you run a high technology business with high adoption of technology and no issues and all the rest of that stuff. So the people, as you said, it's been a really, really challenging time for your staff. What about your customers? What's been happening in their world, and how have they reacted, both kind of in the really scary weeks of end of March when the market was going absolutely berserk, and perhaps more recently as kind of reality is starting to set in?
Well, certainly the last couple of weeks of March and beginning of April saw a big increase in the number of web chats and advisor appointments we were receiving from customers who were either looking to withdraw or certainly questioning whether or not what they were doing and investing was still the right thing for them to do. We didn't see a above normal level of withdrawals beyond that, and I think some of that comes down to the fact that we have such a high percentage of customers who don't invest with us that actually the sort of barriers to entry for us recommending someone invest are pretty high. So we would be very disappointed if we were seeing people withdrawing funds because they needed access to their cash, or they weren't expecting that sort of level of volatility or that sort of risk. So in terms of customers leaving, then we were pretty good there. And in fact, we've seen a big increase in the number of customers that have been coming to us over the last 3 to 4 months, looking for help. And I guess that's something down to the fact that people have had more time on their hands to start considering their personal finances. And also, a lot more people are facing a degree of uncertainty, whether or not it's unemployment or just their financial position. So, getting some support and help has come up the agenda for not just us, but I understand for quite a few businesses, both online and traditional.
Yeah. And what do you think the future holds? I mean, obviously Manchester is a nice, safe and welcoming place for us Southerners at the best of times, but there's seems to be a few issues going on there. How's that impacting your plans to kind of get back to the office?
Well, we started from maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, looking to plan what a return would look like. So we've got quite central, we've got quite central offices in Manchester. There's 70 odd of us, and based on our initial sort of a risk assessment, then our offices can probably hold about 34 people with the appropriate social distancing and not having people sat on top of each other from that. So we've been looking at from the beginning of September, really tying in on the assumption that schools will start going back, and therefore people's day-to-day lives will become slightly more normalised. We've been looking at how we can accommodate those people that do want to come back. So what's clear, I think, is that the days where we'll have an office with all 70 people in and everyone will have a desk, their own desk, we're not going to have people sitting on the floor, is probably gone now, and it's going to be more around where we need to meet physically, both from a collaborative point of view, but also from a social point of view, because I think one of the things that really highlighted to me was that the people who have been impacted most by this, certainly in our company, have been the younger part of the workforce. So those people, we've got a relatively young workforce anyway by comparison, because a large part of our business isn't on the advisory side; it's on the development side and on the design and on the marketing side. And all of those people who perhaps don't have families, live in the city centre, 1-2 bedroom flats with maybe a balcony, and with all the benefits of city centre living being turned off for a few months. So you forget that actually work for many people is an extension of their social lives. So it's from that part of the business where we've been getting more enthusiasm about how are we going to get back into the office. So we're planning on doing it, but it will certainly be in a very different form to what it was 12 months ago.
I try and cast my mind back to what life was like before children, and obviously having had children, I can't remember anything like that. But I think I would have found it very, very difficult to do lockdown in a smaller place with a very young family. It's quite nice having teenagers who are still asleep upstairs and not disturbing me, rather than running around the house.
I mean, I've been going back in a day a week for the last few weeks, and it's quite nice to get back in there and start to see people. But it shows how productive people can be without the office environment.
Yeah, definitely.
Certainly on the development side, there's people there who'll say, well, actually, I work between the hours of 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. anyway, so it doesn't matter where I am.
Yeah. Right, let's talk about Advice Gap. So this is, for those who haven't seen, this is a paper which you put out last week, second year running, which you've conducted this research. So tell me why you think this is an important piece of work.
Well, I mean, the original paper that Citizens Advice Bureau produced in 2014 and I think issued in 2015 was a fundamental part of the whole rationale behind creating OpenMoney. So, as I mentioned earlier, I'd already seen that actually the barriers to entry for people getting advice was becoming higher and higher. And this paper really underpinned what we thought was an opportunity to try and deliver a service that would provide advice to those people for whom the traditional routes were either not accessible or certainly not affordable. So we sort of knew that opportunity was there, but the CAB paper, really hammered it home that not only was the opportunity there from a supply side, but the demand was there, and that you could see that large parts of the population would benefit from being able to get affordable advice. And as is always the case, it's the part of the population for whom this advice and help with their finances could have really material positive impact on their everyday lives. And a lot of this isn't advice as we see it as an industry, or as the FCA defines it. And that was one of the big the big things we looked at, was trying to remove this definition between A with small a advice and big A advice, which is really only relevant to us as an industry. We talk about it and we get ourselves caught up in guidance, little advice, regulated advice, planning, coaching, whereas actually the outside world, they don't give a shit. They just think that actually financial advice is someone who they ask a question, what should I do with my money? And if they ask someone for that, then what they get back is advice. They don't know if it's regulated or it's unregulated. That's the sort of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So trying to create a service that clearly from a regulatory point of view recognises the difference, but from a customer facing point of view, doesn't differentiate between the two of them, was really key, and the advice gap underpins how that proposition develops over time.
Yeah, and I can remember the original CAB paper back in 2015, I think it was. It's one of those things where you kind of, it's perhaps blindingly obvious after you read it, but the advice gap is more nuanced than just a bunch of people who would take advice if only there was some magic way to get them. There's a lot of reasons beneath that, and they came out with kind of 4 versions or 4 types of the advice gap. And that's very much the work which is carried on. And the latest paper, my glamorous assistant has very helpfully put a link to that in the chat room, so you can download that for free off OpenMoney's website. But tell me a bit about...
I don't want to see loads of them turning up in the Manchester Ship Canal, though.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, it'll be fine. Tell me about these 4 advice gaps. So it's showing overall that financial advice is very much kind of a minority sport within the UK. So 10% of the population are actually accessing, as you say, what we would probably know amongst ourselves as financial advice. But talk about the 4 different gaps that kind of sit beneath the rest of the population.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to the awareness and the awareness and the accessibility, and then the affordability. So, across all 4 of them, there's a recognition that people would benefit from getting advice if they knew where to get it. So if they knew where to go for free advice, so if they knew where to go for advice that was priced in a way that they could afford and they were willing to pay, and that's an important one I'll come back to next. And then the preventative gap, that is for those people who would really benefit from advice before they needed advice, and this is the really vulnerable part. So a lot of the report, is based around people becoming aware of the fact that they need advice when they've got themselves into a position where they just don't know what to do next. And primarily it's around debts and not being able to pay bills, and the traditional avenues for them are charities, Citizens Advice Bureau, Step Change, all those people. And what we're trying to say is, actually, if we can help provide advice to people before they get to that position, through a combination of routes. So I'm not sat here saying that OpenMoney is the silver bullet to all of these problems, because actually the solution to this is going to be multifaceted, not just from within the industry, but within government and beyond, increased education, support, financial support, the actual solution to the problem isn't a quick fix. What we're trying to do is offer more choice to people for whom, the choices at the moment is, try and sort it out yourself, do it badly and get yourself into a whole heap of shit, or go to one of the charities who are already overloaded and have limits as to what they're able to actually be doing.
Yeah, and one of the things that struck me when I was reading through the report was, firstly, the consumer research through YouGov was conducted in the first week of March. So coincidentally, kind of the best or the worst time, depending on your point of view, to be assessing the financial health of the nation. But within that context, you look at some of the figures around debt and the amount of debt which people are carrying. I think it's something like 32% of people have credit card debt, and kind of carrying that month to month. And it's a really scary number, about 40% say that they will sometimes run out of money month to month and will flee into will use short-term credits such as overdrafts, credit cards,
Yeah.
payday loans, whatever it is, to help bridge that gap. What I know, kind of the issue of debt is something which is quite something which can trigger you onto a rant on Twitter if you see some stuff which you don't like there, which is something you're really passionate about. But putting that to the side for one moment, what issues does that create for businesses such as yourselves, where you have that suitability requirement to assess the customers? You talked previously, I've heard you say that you find yourself kind of turning away 2/3 of potential customers. Presumably that must be really challenging from a business point of view.
Yeah, well, I mean, within a handful of months of us being live, it was clear that the majority of our customers aren't investors at the time. They know they need to or want to start preparing for the future and making long-term investments, but running them across a normal suitability process shows that they're not ready for it. So that required us to change our business model. So rather than turning these people away, what we provide them with are the tools to take control of their finances and start making the right movements to build those foundations, so that at some point in the future they may be in a position where they can invest. So and that required us to certainly develop the proposition much broader than our original plans had been, because taking into account all the open banking technology, the regulations, so that actually we don't differentiate between customers now. So if a customer comes to us and our recommendation is actually, you need to sort your debts out, here, download the app and we will help you set in place budgets, goals, and tools to be able to get those debts under control, so that at some point in the future they may become an investor. Now, it might well be that for some people, the best that they'll ever achieve is simply to have a control over their finances and to lessen some of the worry, and they'll never become an investor with us. Now, that's still a win for us. So we don't view it, once you've built the technology, then the incremental cost of taking on a customer is really negligible. So whether or not we have one customer a day coming on or 10,000 customers a day coming on, the cost of delivering that advice is pretty much the same. So that enables us to be able to offer a really broad proposition to a whole range of customers, regardless of where they are on the wealth or debt spectrum.
Yeah. But how do you think this countrywide issue of debt is going to play out over the coming years? As you said, a lot of people were in a pretty precarious financial position at the start of March, let alone how they find themselves now. Do you think the government's doing enough with it, like with things like payment holidays and the rest of it, or what's going to happen?
Well, I'm not. Well, I think it looks pretty bleak. I think it looks pretty bleak. As you say, not just from our report, but from pretty much most reports over the last couple of years have said that the level of personal debt is just far too high, and particularly when you apply the sort of average distribution, that level of debt, when applied to low income families, then they will be in a much more precarious position than those people who have high income but have high debt, but it's totally manageable. It's always the lower end who are really exposed, and they're the people who will also be feeling the job security from their employers. And I don't think there's a day that goes by now where there isn't some major employer, particularly retail, high street, aviation, travel, who are announcing big job losses. And again, that's because going into March, it was an economy that was pretty bloated and was carrying a lot of problem businesses. So for me, COVID has simply been the needle that has pricked the balloon that was ready to burst. Anyway, it's just come and done it all at once. And my worry is that we are being carried away on a really artificial support and benefits here, that once they start being relaxed towards the end of the year and into the new year, then we'll start to see some real challenging problems.
Yeah. And comment in the chat room, and yeah, feel free to put any other comments, questions that you've got in there around credit ratings going down because they weren't using enough credit. And I can remember
the credit rating industry is one of the murkiest ones, isn't it?
Yeah, I can remember it's something which struck me when 4 or 5 years ago when I joined the Landcat. I moved from a kind of having a corporate credit card to expenses to needing a new one for my new job, and just applied for a credit card with something like £1,000 as the credit limit, just to kind of, that's more than enough for a month of Landcat expenses, certainly. And the credit card company said, no, you can't have £1,000, here's £7,000. Oh, okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I think the debt industry is just so pervasive now that the solution to it can't simply be borne by the individual. I think that it clearly needs to be brought under control. We know that debt, and certainly unmanageable debt, has huge implications far beyond financial on society in terms of health, crime. It's really a really broad impact. So trying to resolve that by simply allowing the customer to paying over shit underwriting decisions made by profit hungry debt companies is probably not the right way to go, I don't think.
Yeah, and especially to kind of share with the people watching, we did an event, as you will know, with the press last week to talk about the advice gap paper, and had the original authors from the CAB on talking about it, and they're looking at doing some similar research in about the next month or so to come out, and they're talking about a fifth gap which they have identified, people where their outgoings outweigh their ingoings. So as much as you can try and kind of put them into good habits and drop your electricity bill by £10 a month or whatever that might be, you end up to a point where that cash flow, that balance, that spreadsheet, whatever it is you do, is negative, and is negative every month. So not a good place to be.
That's a really bleak place to be, isn't it? Really. So it's a complicated space, but one that needs addressing quickly.
Staying with the cheery stuff, one of the other areas in the advice gap reports that I think struck a lot of people, and I think some of the press picked up on this towards the end of last week, was the perception of advice. And in particular, I think the respondents, the consumers through YouGov, were asked kind of what words come to mind when you hear the word financial advice. And I guess be positive for a second, the 10% of respondents who have interacted with financial advice, almost to a man and woman, were saying it was a really positive experience. So they got the help they wanted, it made a positive outcome, really happy with what's going on, etc. But within the 90%, we saw words such as scam, rip-off, expensive, you name it, a pretty bleak word cloud. You talked about kind of there's no silver bullet to address this perception that's out there, and you look at loads of other things like the trust barometers, and financial services are somewhere normally in between journalists and politicians, so right down on the bonfire come the revolution level. What do you think? Well, firstly, do you think it is up for kind of the financial advice profession as we know it to solve that problem, or actually should they just get on and carry on serving the customers which are there and appreciate it, and encourage somebody else to solve this perception problem?
Well, I think, as you say, for those 10% who get financial, who've benefited from financial advice, then their experience has been really positive. And the advisors that look after them, are doing a great job. And, certainly the vast majority of financial advisors that I know are really good, competent individuals who look after their customers and without doubt put their customers first and do a really good job. I think the problem is that there just seems to be a never-ending line of problems that get reported, always in the media. They're always high profile. The people who are on the wrong side of them are always the vulnerable people. I mean, every weekend you pick up a paper and there are some, depressed faces looking out at the page of you because they've ended up losing money that they simply can't afford to lose as a result of either an advert online or some advice from an advisor who wasn't even approved, and that just has a knock-on, and that has a knock-on effect. And certainly with those people who've never physically met an advisor or never had advice before, so their only relationship with advice or their experience with advice has been what they've read about or they've seen on TV. So whether it's Panorama, or the murdering guy in Coronation Street, financial advisors generally get a pretty bleak picture painted of them by the media in various forms. So that's what people get. And obviously it's not good to be part of a profession that is viewed negatively. So I think ignoring whether or not it has an impact on your own personal business, because for most advisors, just because of the nature of the advice market being traditionally quite smaller, lots of referrals, professional connections, and not having to promote themselves to a mass market solution, then perhaps the need isn't as it's not as obvious as it is for someone's business as it would be. But I think in terms of trying to buck the trend and promote the really good work that the vast majority of people do, then I think it's in everyone's interests to be able to do that, and also to promote the fact that advice is a really positive thing for people to get, and there's a real benefit from people seeking out advice. And if they can, if we can provide as much choice for people, so it's not just those people who've got really complicated affairs, go and find a really good advisor. So there's no compromise based around how much money you've got as to the quality of the advice you get, because everyone's affairs are complicated to themselves. That's why they go for advice, because they don't understand it themselves. We might view, we see it as simple, but I can guarantee our customers don't view their affairs as simple at all, and that's why they come to advice. So, I'm a big champion of financial advice, whether it's fixed fee, inheritance tax, trust planning, right at the top of the market, to helping someone, sleep at night because of their finances and start putting 20 quid away in an ISA to give them a bit of comfort and some security. Both of those things, I would view as a really positive for us as an industry to be focusing on.
Yeah. Final point I've got scribbled down on my list. So again, chat room, now's your time. Is the question of fees. So again, the research, it asks consumers what level of fee they might be willing to pay for advice, and it's obviously a bit of a finger in the air question, because if the awareness of advice is low, and how can people kind of put a price on something which they don't really understand the value for, and all the rest of it. But notwithstanding all of that, the numbers which come out of that are very low and a long way away from the reality of what we might find with a kind of just an average advice experience. So things like £99 for advice on an investment, that type of thing. The wider research doesn't show that the market is price sensitive, which I think everyone knows. But how much do you think fees are a problem, and particularly kind of looking at the cost of delivering advice for advice firms and all of the stuff that's going on with FSCS levies and SEA fees, etc., etc.
Well, I think saying the market isn't price sensitive. You are talking about a small part of the market that is actually engaging with advice. So if we're saying that there's only 10% of people who are getting advice, then actually the sensitivity might be appropriate for that small 10%. But clearly, there is sensitivity in the wider market because it's affecting people's decision to go and take advice. And I've always said that the sole arbiter of value is the customer. So we don't try to pretend that we need to deliver, explain or justify our price. Our price is our price. This is what you get, and if you like it, brilliant. If you don't, then there's plenty to go. We have a very narrow proposition. We don't pretend to be all things to all men. That's our price, and that's how we go. And that's how we go to market. And we know our price is competitive, certainly in that space. So I think it's more around having confidence that your pricing reflects the value you think you deliver, and then leave it to the customers to decide whether or not that's worth it. It's very difficult at the moment because clearly lots of customers, particularly those people who are going to advice for the first time, they have no benchmark. They have nothing to gauge it against. Most of our customers will never have used an accountant, and the only time they'll have used a solicitor possibly will have been when they've been buying a house. So buying professional services for hundreds and hundreds of pounds, it's not a natural thing. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be that financial advisors need to change their business model to accommodate a market that they don't really need. The reason our fees are where they are, which is low, is because we are absolutely designed for that market. We're not going to go and start providing really complicated advice to people because that's not what we're about. And in the same way, it's very difficult for a fixed fee top end advisory firm to provide value for money for someone who wants to start investing £100 a month into an ISA. They're just two different markets. So the solution isn't going to be to try and shoehorn one into the other. It's about recognizing that certain parts of the population are going to be accommodated by these types of businesses, and certain parts are going to be accommodated by these. I think at the moment there just isn't enough choice. There's just not enough choice for the different sorts of customers who've got different objectives, different levels of fee appetite, and that's where these gaps come about, because it's a lot of it is binary. A lot of it is there isn't much difference in fee levels amongst advisors. It's quite a homogenized fee. I know we're seeing an increasing number going to fixed fees, but they still are very much in the minority. So until businesses either decide and go, right, well, that's it, I don't need to be dealing with people who don't want to pay the fees that I want to charge, which is, as I understand it, it's pretty much most advisors I speak to in pretty rude health and are beating customers away at the door. So it's not as though they're having to go down and start changing their fee models to accommodate customers who aren't willing to pay them.
So different segments, different types of customers being served. Yeah, what's not to love? Well, that's it. I think we've hit the time. So yeah, thanks very much. Apologies for the tech gremlins at the start of things, but we seemed to whatever it is we did to resolve that seemed to work. So yeah, Anthony, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for inviting me
on. Not
on.
much for me to say really. Visit Anthony's website, openmoney.co.uk, to download the report. HOMEGAMES next week is back with Steve. He enjoyed his experience with the technology last time so much that he's decided to have another go. Steve's going to be joined by multiple award-winning journalist Ollie Smith, and a little bit of kind of crossover action to what we talked about today. So talking about kind of the role of the press, kind of media perception, and how the press are involved in all of that as well, and how can the press actually start to affect some change around all of that. So Steve and Ollie are two top guys, so that should be a fantastic session. So yeah, look forward to seeing as many of you as you can make it next week. But Anthony, thanks again, and thanks chat room. See you on the next one.
Thanks everyone. Bye.